Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Crossline Community Podcast. My name is Jordan Gash, and I'm the community life pastor at Crossline Community Church down in Laguna Hills, California. But we're so thankful that you're joining with us today again, whether you are a Crossline member or a Crossline leader, and you're listening for your own personal kind of growth and kind of direction from me as the pastor there, or if you're just tuning in as a listener, as being a part of a small group somewhere else, or maybe you're a small group pastor somewhere, or maybe you're a small group leader. That's what this podcast is for. It's designed for each and every one of you to give you some insights and maybe some helpful tips and tricks on ways that you can navigate small groups in the best possible way for greater effectiveness, at least according to my opinion. We're going that direction. Lots of opinions out there, but I have been doing this for a good chunk of about 10 years now, and I'm starting to figure some things out. So we're getting excited about that. But again, I want to take a moment just to affirm you and say thank you so much for what you're doing within your community. If you are a small group leader, what you're doing matters, and the Lord is using you to impact small flocks of people all throughout the community for the glory of God. And I just want to say thank you for that. It cannot be understated what you're doing for the kingdom. So keep going. You're doing great. Well, we have a fun episode today because it has to do with something that is very practical. It happens all the time. And what are we supposed to do about it, whether you're a group leader or you're a small group pastor? And I'll just kind of explain it in this way. So say there's a new small group and it's going great, and you launched it out of your church and you're seeing all these great things happen and you're getting closer and connected. But then one of your friends says, hey, can I invite one of my friends to come and join us in our group, into our group? And you say, sure, that sounds great. But then you find out as they come the first time that they don't attend your church. They attend a different church. And you think to yourself, wait, is this okay? Like, is this a problem? I mean, they're here and they want to explore the Bible, but they're not part of our church. And you start to have that little thing in your mind. You're like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, right? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, can we all play nice in the sandbox? Is that a good or a bad thing? Can small groups be a place where churches can intermingle, or should it stay very consistently with the church that the leader participates in? Or should it be all the group members have to be actively participating in one specific brick and mortar church? Like, what does that actually look like, and how are we actually going to navigate that? So we're going to talk about that from the place of the small group leader. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what does a small group pastor, how do they navigate it? And what are the kind of the choices and options for you as you kind of begin to encounter this within your group? Because if it hasn't already happened, it will happen. There's plenty of groups out there that have multiple different churches represented, and we just have to make a decision on how we want to go about that. So now, again, we wouldn't be even having this conversation if it didn't at least present some dilemmas in having a mixed group. And so let's just talk a little bit about maybe what are some of these dilemmas that could come from having a group that has people from different churches. The first thing really could be just simple, the denominational flavors. Like maybe your church is of one denomination and they're from another denomination. And though you still both confess Christ as Lord, and you still believe in the Trinity, and you believe in all the things that are kind of the foundational tenets of the, Christian faith, there are subtle differences with each denomination. And then even if you go kind of from a Protestant denomination, even to the Catholic kind of church, both believing in Jesus, both seeking out the Lord, but very different in the ways that it operates. And so there's a lot of those dilemmas that could kind of be a part of that, just the denominational flavors and how people go about it. What's of the greater value? What's kind of more emphasized? How do you discuss? How do you pray? All those things can kind of go into when you bring that into a small group setting. Another thing could be the different weekly experiences. If you're having different services each Sunday, you're just having kind of maybe a different way of the Lord emphasizing maybe something on your heart. Maybe one group is going through the book of Job, and the pastor's leading through Job, and it's a deep, discussion around challenge and suffering and finding that, where the other group is doing a relationship series all around love, right? Those are just different flavors that can kind of be brought into the group. very real. It could be the competition of events. Hey, you got Christmas. Christmas for us, it's right around the corner. We got lots of Christmas events, and those are on different weekends and days. The other person's events might be that day too, and it's like, well, what are we going to do as a group? Should we go together? Should we just be separate? This person's inviting me to theirs, but maybe I should go to mine. And those are kind of just little dilemmas that you can have. Unalignment. And let me explain what unalignment, why that could be a dilemma. It could just be an unalignment in really the culture of a church, kind of the way that's represented, but also could be unalignment. And sometimes, and I, as a small group pastor, can attest to this, sometimes we want to direct our small group leaders in a particular direction. Maybe we want to pull everybody together for a series or an emphasis where all the groups are going to kind of go through this at the same time, and we're going to connect in that way. And that might not be the case with the other church. And is that going to present a problem? Is that going to be something that's going to be a miss for that person? Conflicting commitments. Again, that kind of goes back to the events. Maybe there's different things that happen at your church that you have to commit to that you can't the other person's church. And then sometimes you also have the dilemma of prayer requests being a little bit less familiar. You know, if there's somebody that's a part of a church and everybody knows Bob, right? And Bob is this amazing usher that's at the church that everybody loves. And Bob, again, this is just hypothetical, right? Bob is going through cancer. And hey, we're going to be praying for Bob. We got to be praying for his wife, Sherry. And we really just got, we want to be supporting him. We're going to come alongside him and see how we can kind of actually support his family through this. Or could be even something, hey, this just happened to somebody else and we're going to go to GoFundMe. And something along those lines where then it's like that person that's not a part of that church just can feel a little bit disconnected to that story, even though it's not necessarily wrong. It's just a little bit disconnected. So these are just some of the dilemmas of why this is even a conversation. And these things are legitimate. These are real things, but are those things great enough, quote unquote, dilemmas that it should make us make decisive action to say that that's not allowed? And that's kind of what I want to get into. Now, why and when did this become a complication? Because it's interesting. I'm going through the book of Acts, and I love going through the book of Acts and looking at the ways that churches were started. What was a key foundational part of each church as they began? And I mean, some clear things that you see in each of these churches that were started in the book of Acts is you see a deep emphasis on caring for the needy. You see an emphasis on being willing to send out missionaries and witness to the gospel. But one thing that it's clear as day for you to see in a lot of these early churches is the commitment to community and the small groups. Small groups is such a huge part of the foundations of the church of Christ. And so, and in the beginning, when in the end of the Gospels, Jesus, dies and raises again, and you have Acts chapter 1, and Jesus ascends, and then now you have all these disciples, and they're there, and like, okay, well, what do we do now? And they started gathering together, being together in prayer. But it was one entity. It was this one entity of faith. Now, you have the Pentecost, the Holy Spirit comes, and then from there, and again, I'm not going to go through all the details right now. Most of you guys know the story, but then the church spreads like wildfire. Like in the first sermon, thousands of people are added to the church, and then more and more segments of the church kind of even grow, and it's happening all throughout Jerusalem. But then even as it expands, then there's persecution that comes and it scatters. And then we start expanding out, and we start to see new churches in other places. Like there's now the church that starts in Samaria, and then Caesarea, and then it actually makes it all the way up to Antioch, and you go to Cyprus, and then it even expands as Paul does missionary journeys into Philippi and Thessalonica and Ephesus, Corinth. I mean, all these churches start to actually form all over the world, to the point where fast forward, now look at us now. We have hundreds of thousands of churches all across the world. And so this began to be a thing, right? Instead of just the one hub of believers that were in Jerusalem that were meeting as small groups, now you have a little bit of representation, and you would think maybe this wasn't really a problem until these actually official churches kind of get formed, these brick and mortar churches that really come, again, spare you all the details with Constantine and all that, but But it actually happens even early on. And we actually even have a little bit of this complication even begin as Paul starts talking to the church at Corinth. And in 1 Corinthians, he's writing a letter. And he says in chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians, he says, I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of the Lord Jesus, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there is no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. My brothers and sisters, some from Chloe's household have informed me that there is quarrels among you. What this means is one of you says, I follow Paul. Another says, I follow Apollos. Another, I follow Cephas, which is the name for Peter. Still another, I follow Christ. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized in the name of Paul? And so you see even on in Corinth, there's even some of these quarrels that are happening even within these households and these little gatherings where some people are siding with particular teachers and leaders. Some are all about Paul, the founder of the church, but then you have this young, ambitious theologian, from Alexandria named Apollos, and he's really good at debating, and he's really great too. And people like him. And then some people are like, it's foundational Peter. It's all about that. And some are like, it's just all about Jesus. It's focused on Jesus, right? And you start to have these divisions. And he even continues on in that letter as in chapter 3, and he says it again. He says, what after all is Apollos? This is verse 5. What after all is Apollos? What is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe. As the Lord has assigned to each his task, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. So Paul is really trying to emphasize what it sounds like in these words, in these verses, what it sounds like is, listen, this whole leadership thing and where you're kind of getting your pastoring, that's just not as important. The main foundational principle is the Lord. Yes, you want to have godly teachers and people that are teaching it accurately, but in the end, we need to focus on God, and we can't have this ideology where we uplift a particular leader, a particular teacher, and make them our God or make them kind of the focus. And so even in a sense, in the early church, we're beginning to see that with new leaders, with new teachers, with even expanding churches, there are beginning to be slightly different opinions, and there's going to be little quarrels that begin within that. So I'm not saying that having different members of your group being parts of different churches is going to necessarily produce quarrels, but it is going to produce differences. There's going to be some differences. You can focus on the one Lord, and you can focus on the scriptures, which is the same, but there's just going to be some things that are going to be introduced into that. So this has been going on for a long time, and as we expand to the crazy amounts of denominations that we have today and the wide different ways that we do church, it just becomes a thing. So, Mr. or Mrs. Leader, what are you going to do about it? Or Mr. or Mrs. Pastor, small group pastor, what are you going to do about it? Like, does this have to end? If we find out that people are from different churches, are we going to direct them that they can't be part of it? I'm going to give you an answer, my answer to that question, what I believe to be, in my opinion, what I would do and how I would guide people. But let's talk about the pros and the cons of having people of a different church as a part of your group first, because I think that's important. Because there are pros. Having people that are not part of all the same church within a small group, there are some great things that kind of come out of that. The first thing is when you have the ability to kind of not have the quote unquote boundaries of you have to participate in my church, you naturally could have even a greater reach for more people. Hey, we want to gather as believers. We want to study God's word, and we want to grow together. And I don't have to have the disclaimer of like, well, what church do you go to? Do you go to Crossline? Oh, you don't? Well, maybe you should look for another group. Like that inhibits your reach if that's a pre-qualification that somebody has to have. And so there is that pro. hey, we're just gathering together. We're joining together. We're seeking the Lord together. Come be a part of it. Even go, extending that even beyond. I like the Big C church mentality. The Big C church. God, there's, what we say is, how many churches are there in the world? There's one. There's one church. It's Christ Church. So that mentality is that Big C church, that God's going to build his church, that Christ is the king, and we can kind of have this Big C church mentality. And it's almost encouraging to kind of go, look at us. We're all together. We're unified. It's not contingent on the leader. It's not contingent on a particular way of doing things. We can actually unify around Christ and his scriptures together. So that's pretty exciting. And then there's when you can't necessarily put all the eggs in the basket of your church leadership, because maybe your group represents multiple different churches. When you can't put all your eggs in one thing, it actually forces you to have more ownership of your own personal vision for your church. It actually elevates sometimes the leader themselves. So understanding that the leader actually, when they don't have the church necessarily that is the 100% direction of what they're doing, then they actually have to step up a little bit and actually own a personal vision that's going to unite everybody within their group, regardless of what church you're a part of. I like that. Then there's another pro. You get more ideas. One of the things, I'm a pastor at Crossline. I love my church. I love going to my church. I love going to my services. But I've even talked to my team, my executive team, and we talked about the idea of, hey, every once in a while, it's a good idea for us to go to another church, go to another service, just worship with them, and then be able to experience, like, hey, what are they doing? What ideas can I even kind of glean from what things, best practices? Wow, that's really good. They do that in a really cool way. Or I love the way they taught that. Or I love how they set up communion. All those different things. Those are great ideas. And so even when you have that in a smaller kind of picture within the small group, you get new ideas from different churches. And so you kind of even can take that as a positive. Not all ideas are bad. Actually, a lot of ideas are good as you bounce them around in a laboratory of what works and what's the best. And then finally, I think, you have multiple churches, you have multiple teachers. And if you have multiple teachers, then you get multiple insights, and you can have almost deeper insights into the scriptures. Some people may say that if you have multiple voices that are teaching a passage in a way, that's going to make it more confusing. I disagree. I think as you look at different ways that teachers teach a certain passage or the ways they explain things, it actually can even broaden our understanding of each scripture as we see kind of maybe some of the ways that the particular teachers bring their experience into that, their understanding into it. And so it's actually pretty cool because you can have even more of that going on with things. So there are pros to having people from other churches in your group. Okay, finally, before I give you my answer, I promise you I'll give you my answer. But before I do that, I do want to talk about what are the cons. And we've talked a little bit about that regarding even the dilemmas. But I think just kind of boiling it down to kind of in a nutshell, so the key things that are the cons of having different people is, and I'll just say it as it is, it's competition. I'd like to say that we're all perfect and holy and never prideful. But the only person that was never prideful, perfect, and holy was Jesus, right? And so sometimes we have this attitude where it's like, especially if we like our church and we enjoy our church, we can get into this attitude of like wanting to one up the other person's church, the other couple's church. Man, I just I think my church is better here. I think this is better. And it's like, oh, we should come to this event. Oh, your pastor did this, or our pastor did that. It's like, it just naturally can happen. Another con, of having people in different churches, there's awkwardness sometimes, even especially, and I can attest to this because I actually have been this. I've been this person when we switched we were part of a church, and I was pastoring there, and we were a part of a small group But then I got a job somewhere else a little later, but I still loved all those people and I wanted to participate with that group and I didn't want to leave that group. I was participating in it. I was at another church. And so we lingered for a little bit within that group. But then what I'm talking about as the con is that awkwardness of being the minority. That is a con because I felt, and my wife felt, we felt a little bit out of place sometimes as they were all talking about this and even laughing at like inside jokes. Oh, Lan, can you believe when this happened at the service? That was hilarious. And you're like, oh man, I can't believe when the camera guy, he accidentally ripped a big burp, I don't know, or a big fart. I don't know. I guess you don't rip burps, you rip farts, I guess. But anyways, but if I wasn't there, I can't understand, so I can't laugh at it, right? And so everybody's laughing, and then you kind of like, oh yeah, that sounds funny. It can be awkward, and especially if you're that one minority person. So there's awkwardness. There is, and this might be the greatest disadvantage. This is the greatest con, and it's the disadvantage of being able to go even deeper with the people in your group. And what I mean by that is we have such busy schedules, and we would love to just when we say that we're doing life with other couples or other families and other people, doing life with them doesn't mean that we're with them every single day. I mean, we find time to spend with them, but it's in between the sports schedules. It's in between, all the work that I have to do. It's in between all the things that we have to do, but we find time for these small group friends. But when you actually take away a Sunday, that time on a Sunday, as being one less day per week where you're actually not connecting with the people in your small group, it's unfortunately, that's one less opportunity for you to go even deeper with your small group. And for your kids, if your group has a bunch of kids, like that's also another chance, like them for not being able to get as close, and then you can only see each other at small group. Or if you're getting babysitters, then they never see each other. You just see each other for parties or little gatherings here and there. But like that's one of the cons, I think, of having people that are part of different churches is you miss out on that. And then the last thing is kind of, we talked about it before, is there's sometimes the theological or denominational drift that can happen, that can kind of slowly pull a group apart just because of the slight differences of the ways that you see something. And we'd love to kind of put Christ over all things and not let that become a big deal. And we try to, and many times we can find success for that for a while and for a time. But there's that little thing in the back of your mind that sometimes you just don't feel that connection because of just the ways that you live out your theology, And so it sounds hard to admit all these things because we just want to be just the church, the Big C church. We just want to all be connected. But these are just the realities, and they're not necessarily bad. They're not bad things, but are things that can kind of make a group not as close, not as uniquely knit together. So what are we supposed to do? Group leaders, group pastors. Let me start first to the group leaders. If you're a group leader and you have people in the church, in the end, I think it's got to be a decision that you're going to make, unless your church, again, we'll talk about this in a second, unless your church is directing you not to do it. But that's going to have to be a decision that you're going to make. Is this something that you guys can deepen it? You guys can still grow together. You can figure it out. But at the same time, if you're a leader and you're seeing that having multiple different churches, or maybe one person that's from a different church, and you see that it's actually, it's becoming almost a hindrance even to depth. And it's becoming something where there's not quite that connection. It feels like there's a group of people growing together in connection, and there's this other group. I think what you need to do is, as a leader, you need to have a conversation with those people, and not kick them out. Never kick people out. I would say that. Don't kick people out. But you might want to encourage them and say, hey, it seems like there might be opportunity, for you even to have deeper connection with the people at your church. And maybe we can help you get connected but you're always welcome. You're welcome here as long as you need to be. But here's my encouragement. And that's a hard conversation sometimes. It's awkward. And I'm not saying it's not awkward, but again, for the sake of even their growth and development, connection with other believers, and then also with your group, you have to be aware of that. So, but if it's not a problem and you guys are still going to go too deep and you guys are still doing lots of life together, then again, maybe that's a conversation that doesn't need to happen because it's not creating all these cons that we talked about. You haven't seen these cons within it and you're only seeing the pros. And then that's a good thing. And then the last thing I would say for small group pastors, if you're a small group pastor, you should have a plan. You should have a way that you're going to have this discussion. It should not be something that you're going to kind of be taken by surprise by. You should have at least a little bit of a plan of what you're going to say or what you're going to do and kind of what's your mentality. I think it's okay to have a loose mentality, and that's what you're going to hear from me. But you need to have some sort of response. So if people came to me and they had different people in their group, I would say this. That's great. Hey, so cool that you're having this opportunity to reach more. So great that you're able to, and again, I list all those kind of deeper, those pros, right? That you have big C church mentality, that you could share ideas and have that and grow together. That's so cool. As in my experience, with my own personal experience, as well as an experience of some of the groups that I've had, sometimes the challenge of having other people in your group can lead to, a lack of depth, and a lack of even being able to take that step even deeper to where you want to go. And actually it could put them at a greater disadvantage, to connection because they're not stepping into the community that's made available to their church. So my advice, as I would advise you, is if you can find a way to make it unified to Crossline, then that's what I would say it's going to do. Now, if it's going to be something that's not going to be a quote unquote Crossline group and it's just something that's going to be your personal kind of growth and hangout, then more power to you. Get after it. We're excited about it. But if you're going to have a small group that's going to be with Crossline and we're going to promote it with our small group campaigns, this is what I would encourage you towards. So that would be my mentality. So I say it's okay. As you heard me, I say it's okay. I would say my recommendation is to keep it unified to one church. That would just be my recommendation. So, but that goes to me, it's being said to me, who has a group that's all Crossline and also has groups that are not all Crossline. So I have both. So that's what I would say. So yeah, is that nice and clear for you? Both. I like both. But my advisement as quote unquote small group pastor of Crossline is trying to be unified to Crossline because I think you're going to have a greater depth of experience. So interesting conversations. These are the practical things that aren't as black and white as you'd like them to be, but there are good conversations for all of us to have. And they're things that you will experience if you haven't yet experienced it already within your group or at your church. So, hey, thank you guys so much for listening. I'm praying for you. I'm lifting you up. I'm praying for navigation for these kind of things as you navigate this journey of kind of the practical side of things. And before we leave, I just want to bless you. I like to close my podcast always with a blessing of Philippians chapter 1, verses 9 and 11. It just says, "And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God." Hey, you guys have a great rest of your week, and thanks for listening.